The neon lights of Chicago cast long shadows as Marcus Johnson notices the woman hurrying down Michigan Avenue, her designer heels clicking against the pavement. 3 years of living on these streets have taught him to spot trouble, and the men trailing her spell exactly that. What he doesn't know is that the frightened tourist he's about to help isn't just another lost soul. She's Sarah Chen, a tech billionaire who walked away from her empire for one night of anonymity. In the next few hours, 2 worlds will collide and both their lives will change forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus knows every crack in these Chicago sidewalks, every steam vent that offers warmth on bitter winter nights, every doorway that provides shelter from the rain. Tonight, the autumn wind carries the first hints of the brutal winter to come, and he adjusts the straps of his weathered backpack, the container of his entire world. Inside, wrapped carefully in plastic, lies a dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, a reminder of the classroom he left behind 3 years ago. The evening routine is always the same. He makes his way from the public library, where he spends his days reading and using the computers to keep his mind sharp, to the sandwich shop on Wells Street. Jimmy, the owner, saves the day's leftovers for the regulars who know to come around closing time. It's not charity. Marcus helps clean, takes out the trash, and sometimes fixes the ancient register when it acts up. Pride is the one thing the streets haven't taken from him. "Looking sharp today, Professor," Jimmy calls out as Marcus approaches. The nickname sticks, even though it's been years since he stood in front of a classroom of eager sophomores teaching them about Shakespeare and dreams. The memories of his old life come in waves, the smell of chalk dust, the sound of bell rings, the excitement in young eyes when a difficult passage finally makes sense. Before the accident, before the medical bills, before everything crumbled. As he helps Jimmy close up, Marcus notices Carl and Maria huddled in their usual spot across the street. They're an elderly couple who lost their home during the financial crisis and never recovered. He splits his sandwich with them as he does most nights. "Knowledge and kindness," his mother used to say, "those are the only things no one can take from you." Even now, he lives by those words. The streets have their own hierarchy, their own rules. Marcus has earned respect among the homeless community for his fairness and willingness to help others navigate the system, where to find shelter on the coldest nights, which social workers actually follow through, how to avoid the predators who see their vulnerability as an opportunity. He's become an unofficial guardian, especially for the newcomers who arrive with shock still fresh in their eyes. His spot for the night is a clean corner near the public library, sheltered from the wind by a massive concrete planter. The librarians know him, respect him even. Sometimes they save magazines for him, and he, in turn, keeps an eye on the building after hours. It's a small piece of the reciprocal economy that keeps him going, these unspoken arrangements that make life on the streets bearable. As he settles, Marcus pulls out his most precious possession, a small notebook filled with lesson plans and story ideas. Even now, he can't stop teaching. 2 nights a week, he meets with a small group of homeless teens in the park, helping them with their homework or preparing for GED tests. It's not a classroom, but it's something. It's purpose. The city lights paint shadows on his notebook as he writes about today's events. He's learned to find beauty, even here, in the way sunset turns skyscraper windows to gold, in the melody of street musicians echoing through the subway tunnels, in the small acts of kindness that occur when most people aren't looking. These observations fill his notebook, alongside quotes from the books he still devours daily. Tomorrow will be another day of carefully balanced dignity and survival. Marcus has his routine down to a science: the morning coffee from Sister Margaret's shelter, the library hours, the odd jobs that earn him enough to maintain his independence. He's not looking for pity or handouts. What he wants, what he's always wanted, is the chance to stand on his own feet again, to return to the classroom, to make a difference. As the city settles into its nighttime rhythm, Marcus closes his notebook and prepares for sleep. 3 years on these streets have taught him that survival isn't just about finding food and shelter. It's about keeping your soul intact, your humanity alive. Tomorrow will be another day of trying to do just that. Sarah Chen stares at her reflection in the hotel bathroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself without the power suits and perfectly styled hair that Grace magazine covers. She's traded her usual CEO armor for jeans and a simple sweater bought from a tourist shop, her long black hair tucked under a basic baseball cap. For the first time in years, she looks like the girl who used to code in her garage before Tech Future became a billion-dollar empire. The decision to disappear for a night wasn't planned. It came after 18 straight hours of board meetings where men twice her age questioned every decision she'd made, despite the company's soaring profits. "Perhaps you're being too idealistic," they'd said about her plans to develop affordable educational software for underfunded schools. The same criticism she'd heard for years. Too soft, too idealistic, not ruthless enough for Silicon Valley. Her phone buzzes again, the 14th call from her assistant in the past hour. Sarah switches it to airplane mode, feeling a small thrill of rebellion. The last time she'd been truly unreachable was 5 years ago, before her coding breakthrough in AI education systems made her the youngest female tech billionaire in history. Success had built walls around her, brick by brick, until she could barely breathe. Chicago wasn't her usual scene. She'd flown in for a tech conference, another endless parade of networking and artificial smiles. But tonight, walking past the hotel's front desk in her disguise, she feels a forgotten lightness in her steps. No bodyguards, no assistants, no schedule, just the wind off Lake Michigan and the promise of anonymity in a city that doesn't know her face. The early evening air carries the scent of food from nearby restaurants, reminding her of late nights coding in college, surviving on takeout, and determination. She watches couples strolling hand in hand, street musicians playing for tips, people living their lives without the weight of shareholders' expectations. A homeless man holds a door open for an elderly woman, and they exchange smiles, a simple human connection that Sarah realizes has become foreign to her world of coded politeness and hidden agendas. She walks without direction, deliberately losing herself in the unfamiliar streets. Each turn takes her further from the gleaming business district, past buildings that grow gradually less polished. It's exhilarating, being no one asking for funding, for favors, for a piece of her time or her wealth. The real world feels raw, unfiltered, alive in a way her sanitized corporate existence doesn't. The sun sets, painting the sky in colors she usually sees only through her penthouse windows. Sarah realizes she's wandered into an area that looks nothing like the tourist districts. The streets are darker here, the sidewalks emptier. A group of men notice her, really notice her, in a way that nobody has in years. Without her usual protective barriers, she feels suddenly, acutely vulnerable. Her instinct is to reach for her phone, but what would she do? Call her security team and shatter this brief escape into normalcy, admit that she's not capable of navigating the real world anymore? The thought stings her pride. She quickens her pace, her designer sneakers, the one thing she couldn't bring herself to change, clicking against the pavement. The men are definitely following now. Sarah's heart pounds as she realizes how far she's strayed from the safety of her usual world. The irony doesn't escape her. She spent years fighting to be taken seriously in male-dominated boardrooms, only to find herself afraid of men on the street. All her wealth, all her power, means nothing in this moment. She turns down Michigan Avenue, hoping to find her way back to familiar territory. The streetlights cast long shadows, and she feels eyes on her back. For the first time, she questions the wisdom of this escape attempt. She's spent so long protected from the world's rough edges that she's forgotten how to navigate them. Yet somehow, This fear feels more real, more honest than anything she's experienced in years. In her, carefully controlled world, she'd forgotten what it meant to be simply human, vulnerable and alive. The city changes when darkness falls. Marcus knows this better than most, watching from his corner as the well-dressed office workers give way to a different crowd. He notices everything. The three men who've been circling the block, the nervous tourists clutching their maps too tightly, the subtle shift in the air that often precedes trouble. These observations have kept him alive for 3 years. Tonight feels different. Maybe it's the approaching storm front that has everyone on edge. Or maybe it's the way those men keep looking down Michigan Avenue with too much interest. Marcus recognizes them. Not personally, but he knows their type. They're the predators, who see the lost and vulnerable as easy marks, the kind he's learned to watch out for since his first night on the streets. The woman in the baseball cap doesn't belong here. Everything about her screams it. The way she walks, trying to project confidence, but betraying uncertainty in every step. The designer sneakers that probably cost more than most people around here make in a month. The constant glancing over her shoulder. She's playing at being ordinary, but Marcus can tell she's anything but. He should mind his own business. That's the first rule of street survival. Don't get involved in other people's problems. He's seen too many good people get hurt trying to be heroes. But something about this situation nags at him, perhaps because she reminds him of his former students. That same mix of vulnerability and determination. The three men are definitely following her now. Marcus watches as they split up, two falling back while one moves ahead. A classic herding tactic he's seen too many times. They're steering her toward the darker side streets, away from the relative safety of Michigan Avenue's lights and cameras. His conscience wages war with his survival instinct. Getting involved could mean trouble, the kind that leads to hospital visits or worse. He's managed to avoid serious violence so far by being careful, by knowing when to walk away. But walking away now feels impossible. Knowledge and kindness. His mother's voice echoes in his head, and he knows he's already made his decision. Rain begins to fall. Fat drops that promise a heavier downpour to come. The woman increases her pace, but she's heading exactly where they want her to go. Marcus sees the fear in her movements now, no longer hidden behind pretense. She doesn't know these streets, doesn't understand that her path is leading her into a trap. He gathers his few belongings quickly, securing his notebook inside its waterproof bag. If he's going to help, he needs to move now, before she turns. Down that next street, his mind races through options. He could call out a warning, but that might spook both her and them. He could try to find a police officer, but they're scarce in this area, and it would take too long. The street lights flicker as thunder rolls overhead. Marcus sees the moment she realizes her mistake, the subtle stiffening of her shoulders as she notices the man ahead of her. The quick glance back that confirms the others are still following. She's trapped, and she knows it. Years of teaching taught him about timing, about choosing the right moment to intervene. As he moves from his corner, he remembers breaking up fights in school hallways, talking down angry teenagers, finding ways to diffuse tension before it exploded. The streets aren't so different. It's all about reading people, understanding motivations, finding the right approach. The rain is falling steadily now, drumming against the pavement and the few remaining shop awnings. Marcus pulls his worn jacket closer, feeling the weight of his decision as he steps out of the shadows. Whatever happens next will shatter the careful routine he's built, the relative safety of invisibility. But some things are worth the risk. He moves with purpose now, years of street knowledge guiding his steps. There's a way to handle this, to redirect the situation without escalating it into violence. He just hopes she'll trust him enough to follow his lead, this unknown woman who's wandered into a world she clearly doesn't understand. Because right now, despite all their differences, he might be the only chance she has. Time slows to a crawl as Marcus approaches, each raindrop catching the streetlight like suspended glass. He times his intersection perfectly, making it appear natural when he stumbles into Sarah's path, his worn backpack sliding off his shoulder. "Emily, there you are." His voice carries just the right mix of relief and familiarity. "We've been worried sick. Pastor Mike sent me to find you." The lie flows smoothly, born from years of reading situations and knowing exactly what to say. Sarah freezes. For a split second, confusion clear in her eyes. But something in Marcus's steady gaze communicates the urgency of the situation. Maybe it's the subtle tilt of his head toward her pursuers, or the gentle pressure of his hand on her elbow, steering her toward the shelter's direction. I got turned around," she manages, picking up the thread of his improvisation with surprising quickness. Her voice shakes slightly, but she holds it together. "Easy mistake to make in this weather." Marcus keeps his tone casual, but his eyes scan their surroundings constantly. The three men have paused, reassessing the situation now that their target appears to have a connection to the local homeless community. "Let's get you back before this rain gets worse." They walk together, Marcus's hand never leaving her elbow, guiding her with subtle pressure. He takes a deliberately meandering path through areas he knows are well lit and have late-night businesses still open. The men follow for 2 blocks before gradually falling back, looking for easier prey. Only when they're safely away does Marcus feel Sarah's trembling. "You can breathe now," he says softly. "They're gone." He releases her arm and steps back, giving her space, careful not to appear threatening. Sarah lets out a shaky breath, clutching her arms around herself. The rain has plastered her hair to her face, making her look even more vulnerable. "Thank you," she whispers. I didn't realize I'd wandered into..." She trails off, not knowing how to finish the sentence without sounding privileged. "Bad neighborhoods," Marcus supplies with a hint of wry humor. "Yeah, the tourist maps don't usually mark those." He studies her face, seeing the gradual transition, from fear to relief to embarrassment. "You're not from around here." It's not a question, but Sarah shakes her head anyway. "That obvious, huh?" She attempts a smile, though her hands are still shaking. "The shoes gave you away." Marcus gestures to her designer sneakers, now splattered with rain and mud. Not exactly standard issue for this part of town. A genuine laugh escapes her, surprising them both. The tension breaks slightly, leaving them standing in the rain, an unlikely pair connected by a moment of crisis. Marcus knows he should walk away now. He's done his good deed, kept someone safe. That's where these interactions usually end. But something stops him. Maybe it's the way she's still looking around uncertainly, or maybe it's the teacher in him that can't leave someone lost and struggling. "Look," he says, "you're still pretty far from the tourist areas. If you want, I can point you in the right direction. Or," he hesitates, knowing he's about to break another of his careful rules, "I can show you how to get back. Your choice." Sarah looks at him, really looks at him for the first time, seeing past the worn clothes and the harsh lines that life on the streets has carved into his face. She sees kindness in his eyes and something else. Intelligence, dignity, a hint of the man he used to be. "I'd appreciate a guide," she says softly, "if you're sure it's not too much trouble." Marcus nods, already calculating the safest route back to the main tourist district. "Just remember," he says as they begin walking, "sometimes the people you're supposed to be afraid of are the ones you need to trust, and the ones who look safe might be anything but." That's the first lesson of the streets. Sarah absorbs this, thinking how different it is from the corporate world she knows, where danger wears designer suits and carries business cards. "I'm beginning to understand that," she replies, falling into step beside him. The rain eases to a gentle drizzle as they walk, the city's lights reflecting off wet pavement like scattered stars. Marcus leads them through a route that seems random but isn't, staying in well-lit areas, avoiding dark alleys, keeping a careful distance from groups that might mean trouble. "First rule of city navigation," Marcus explains, gesturing to a street sign, "is knowing which streets change personality after dark. This one's fine until 8 p.m., then you want to avoid it." He speaks with the authority of a professor giving a lecture, something in his tone making Sarah pay close attention. "You sound like you've taught this before," she ventures, watching him carefully for a reaction. The words slip out before she can stop them, her analyst's mind already picking up patterns in his speech and manner. Marcus's step falters slightly, but he recovers quickly. "Maybe in another life," he says, his voice carefully neutral. "Turn here, this street's better lit." He changes the subject smoothly, but Sarah catches the shadow that crosses his face. They pass a late-night diner, its windows steamy and inviting. The smell of coffee and grilled food wafts out, and Sarah notices Marcus glancing at it briefly before looking away. Without thinking, she stops. "I could use a coffee," she says. Would you join me? As a thank you." Marcus stiffens, pride warring with other emotions on his face. "You don't owe me anything," he says quietly. "Getting you back safe is enough." "It's not charity," Sarah says quickly, understanding his hesitation. "It's professional courtesy for the guided tour." She manages a small smile, trying to convey sincerity without pity. A long moment passes before Marcus nods, something shifting in his expression. "Professional courtesy," he repeats, with the ghost of a smile. "I can accept that." Inside, they settle into a booth away from the windows. The waitress brings coffee without being asked, nodding to Marcus with familiar recognition. Sarah realizes this place knows him, but not as a beggar or nuisance. There's respect in the waitress's greeting. "You help keep an eye on the place at night, don't you?" Sarah asks, putting the pieces together. She's spent years reading people, finding patterns in behavior. Marcus is a puzzle she's beginning to understand. He wraps his hands around the warm coffee cup, nodding slightly. "Everyone needs someone watching their back in this city," he says. "Even diners." There's pride in his voice, dignity in the way he holds himself despite his worn clothes. They talk, carefully at first, then with growing ease. Marcus tells her about the city's hidden rhythms, which food carts have the best deals, which street musicians are worth stopping for, which shortcuts are safe, and which aren't. Sarah finds herself fascinated, not just by the information, but by the way he presents it, structured, logical, with clear cause and effect. "Why are you really out here tonight?" Marcus finally asks, studying her over his coffee cup. "Tourist areas are back that way, and you're dressed to blend in. Badly, but you're trying. You're running from something." Sarah meets his gaze, surprised by his perception. "Sometimes," she says slowly, "you need to disappear to remember who you are." It's the most honest thing she's said all night, though she keeps the details vague. Marcus nods, understanding in his eyes. "The streets are good for that," he admits. "They strip away everything but who you really are." He doesn't push for more, and Sarah feels a surge of gratitude for his discretion. Outside, the city hums its nighttime song of distant sirens and passing cars. In this small diner, two people from vastly different worlds find an unexpected moment of connection, each recognizing in the other a similar kind of loneliness, a similar search for authenticity in a world that often demands pretense. After the warmth of the diner, the night air feels crisp and clean, the earlier rain having washed away the city's grime. Marcus pauses at the corner, considering something. "The tourist route back is that way," he says, pointing east. "But there's another path if you're interested, less direct, but..." He trails off, uncharacteristically hesitant. "But," Sarah prompts, curiosity piqued by this shift in his confidence, "but more real, the Chicago tourists never see." He watches, her face carefully, gauging her reaction. "Your choice." Sarah checks her phone, still on airplane mode, and makes a decision. "Show me." They turn west instead of east, away from the gleaming towers of downtown. Marcus leads her down a street where every surface is covered in vibrant murals, the artwork telling stories of immigration, struggle, and triumph. "Local artists," he explains, pointing to a particularly striking piece. "They paint these at night," adding, "Little by little, I've watched this one grow for months." Near a community garden, tucked between buildings, An elderly woman is watering plants despite the late hour. She waves to Marcus, calling out in Spanish. He responds fluently, introducing Sarah as a friend. The woman insists on giving them each a sprig of fresh mint, her weathered hands carefully wrapping the stems in damp paper. Maria tends this garden for the whole neighborhood, Marcus explains as they walk on. Everything she grows goes to local families. She was a botanist in Mexico. Before he lets the sentence hang, respecting someone else's private history, they pass a late-night bakery where the smell of fresh bread fills the air. Through the window, they can see bakers preparing the next day's goods. They hire people others won't, Marcus says quietly. No questions asked about past mistakes, just a chance to work. Sarah notices how he straightens slightly when speaking about second chances. In a small park, a group of teenagers huddles around a chess table under a streetlight. They call out to Marcus enthusiastically. "The professor!" one boy shouts. "You coming to help with calculus tomorrow?" "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus replies, and Sarah catches a glimpse of the teacher he must have been. The teens look at him with genuine respect, not pity or fear. Near midnight, they climb a set of stairs to an elevated train platform. The station is quiet now, between the rush hours. Marcus leads her to a specific spot, and suddenly Sarah understands. Why? The view stretches for miles, skyscrapers and streetlights creating a galaxy of human-made stars, Lake Michigan, a dark void beyond. During the day, everyone's too busy to notice, Marcus says, gesturing at the panorama. But at night, you can see how it all connects. Every light is a story. Every dark space holds something waiting to be discovered. Sarah leans against the railing, absorbing the view. In all her years in Chicago, she's never seen the city like this. Her world has been boardrooms and luxury hotels, while Marcus's Chicago pulses with life at street level. She thinks about the billions she's spent on technological innovation, wondering if she's been solving the wrong problems. "The homeless teenagers you help with calculus," she says suddenly. "How many are there?" "More than there should be," Marcus replies, his voice tight. "Some ran away from worse situations, some aged out of foster care, some got kicked out for being who they are. All of them brilliant, if someone would just give them a chance." The passion in his voice is unmistakable. A train approaches, its lights cutting through the darkness. "That's your ride back downtown," Marcus says. "This line's safe at night. It'll take you straight to the tourist district." Sarah hesitates, not ready for this glimpse into another world to end. "The kids you teach, what do they need most?" "Besides the obvious, food, shelter, laptops, access to online courses, a way to keep up with school when they can't attend regularly." He says it matter-of-factly, not asking for anything. "But they're resourceful. We make do with library. Computers when we can get them." The train slows to a stop, doors opening with a hydraulic hiss. Sarah steps forward, then turns back. "Thank you," she says, "not just for keeping me safe, but for showing me this. I needed to see it." Marcus nods, already fading back into the shadows of the platform. "Be careful out there," he says. "And remember, there's always more to see if you know where to look." As the train pulls away, Sarah watches him through the window until he disappears, her mind already racing with possibilities. She's built her career on identifying problems and creating solutions. Tonight, she's seen problems she never knew existed in a city she thought she understood. Sarah can't bring herself to leave after just one stop. She gets off at the next station, surprising Marcus, who's still there, lost in thought. He raises an eyebrow, but doesn't comment as she walks back to him. Without discussion, they find themselves settling on a bench, the city's heartbeat pulsing beneath them through the elevated tracks. "Tell me about teaching," Sarah says softly, watching his profile in the shifting shadows. "What made you choose it?" Marcus is quiet for so long she thinks he won't answer. When he does, his voice carries the weight of carefully preserved memories. "I had this English teacher in high school, Mr. Reynolds. He was the first person who made me feel seen, not just as a student, but as a person. He gave me books that asked big questions, made me think about my place in the world. He pulls out his weathered notebook, handling it with reverence. I wanted to do that for other kids. Show them that literature isn't just dead words on a page. It's a mirror and a window, a way to understand yourself and others. His fingers trace the notebook's worn edges. I taught for 12 years. Inner city school, tough neighborhood. But those kids, they were amazing, so hungry to learn, to grow. Sarah notices how he comes alive talking about his students, years of street-hardened caution falling away. What happened? She asks gently. His jaw tightens. Life, medical bills, a system that didn't work like it should. He closes the notebook. Your turn. What's your story? Sarah weighs her words carefully, sharing truth without revealing too much. I work in technology, spent years building something I thought would help people. But lately, I've been wondering if I've lost touch with what people really need. Hence, wandering the streets of Chicago alone at night. There's a hint of gentle teasing in his voice. She laughs softly. Not my smartest decision, I'll admit. But I needed to remember what it feels like to be normal, to see the world without filters. Normal's overrated, Marcus says, surprising her. The world needs people who see things differently, who question the way things are. He glances at her. Though maybe next time question things in safer neighborhoods. A comfortable silence falls between them. Below, a street musician plays saxophone, the blues notes floating up to wrap around them like warm silk. Marcus closes his eyes, listening. Jerry, he says, Vietnam vet, played with some of the greats back in the day. Now he plays for tourists, but this time of night, this is when he plays for himself. Sarah listens, really listens, hearing the soul in every note. In her normal life, she'd pass by without noticing, too busy with calls and meetings. How do you know everyone's story? She asks. I pay attention. Out here, stories are currency. Sometimes they're all people have left. He opens his notebook again, shows her pages of careful observations, quotes, snippets of lives observed. Everyone has a story worth telling, worth hearing, even if society stopped listening. Sarah thinks about the algorithms she's designed, the AI systems meant to connect people. None of them capture this. The raw humanity of shared stories, the dignity in being truly seen. Sometimes, she says, I think we've confused connection with communication. We're more linked than ever. But are we really seeing each other? Marcus looks at her sharply, hearing something in her voice. Technology's just a tool, he says. Like anything else, it's how we use it that matters. He pauses. Those kids I help, they don't need fancy programs. They need someone to look them in the eye and say, I believe in you. No app can replace that. The night air grows cooler, and Sarah shivers slightly. Marcus notices but doesn't offer his jacket. He respects her too much for empty gestures. Instead, he stands. Come on, one more stop before you head back. Where? There's a place that makes the best tamales in Chicago, open late for third-shift workers. Maria, the garden lady, her daughter runs it. You haven't really seen this city until you've tried them. Sarah stands, knowing she should return to her hotel, to her real life. But something keeps her here, in this parallel Chicago where success is measured in stories shared and small kindnesses. Lead the way, Professor, she says, using the teenager's nickname for him. His smile in response is small, but genuine, and they descend the station stairs together, two people gradually discovering that despite their different worlds, they speak the same language of hope and possibility. The tamale shop is barely bigger than a food truck, wedged between a laundromat and a phone repair store. The aroma of masa and slow-cooked meat makes Sarah's mouth water as they approach. Behind the counter, a young woman with Maria's eyes greets. Marcus like family, rapid-fire Spanish mixing with laughter. Sarah watches their interaction, her mind racing. She could solve so many problems here with a single phone call. Fund the community garden, support the tamale shop's expansion, create a proper learning center for Marcus's students. The weight of her wealth feels heavy in this moment, a secret burning to be revealed. But as she observes Marcus chatting with the owner, his dignity intact in every interaction, she understands that throwing money at these situations isn't the answer. These people have built something precious, a network of mutual support, of genuine human connection. Her corporate solutions might do more harm than good. Try this, Marcus says, handing her a wrapped tamale. Carmen's grandmother's recipe. 3 generations of perfect masa. His face shows genuine pleasure in sharing this piece of his world. The food is incredible, better than any high-end restaurant Sarah's ever visited. She says as much, and Carmen beams with pride. The secret, she tells Sarah, is that we cook with memory. Every tamale carries the story of our family's journey. As they eat, standing at the small counter by the window, Sarah notices how everyone who passes by waves to Marcus. He's not just surviving on these streets, he's part of their fabric, woven into the community in ways that can't be measured in financial terms. "You're thinking too hard," Marcus observes, studying her face. "I can almost hear the gears turning," Sarah starts, caught in her contemplation. "I was thinking about impact," she says carefully, "about how we measure success in life. In my world, it's all about metrics and growth charts, but here," she gestures at the warm little shop, at the people greeting each other like family. "Here, it's something else entirely." Marcus wraps up the remainder of his tamale, tucking it away for later, with practiced care. Success? He tests the word like it's foreign. Out here, success is making it through another day with your humanity intact. It's helping someone else even when you barely have enough for yourself. It's remembering who you are when the world's trying to make you forget. His words hit Sarah like a physical force. In her pursuit of technological innovation, has she forgotten these basic truths? Her company's mission statement talks about connecting humanity through digital innovation. But when was the last time she made a real human connection like this? The neon signs outside paint shifting colors across their faces as they finish their meal. Sarah's phone buzzes in her pocket, airplane mode deactivated by accident. Suddenly, messages flood in. Missed calls, urgent emails. Her assistants, increasingly panicked texts. Her other life demanding attention. Marcus notices her expression change. "Reality calling?" he asks with gentle understanding. "Something like that." Sarah silences the phone, but the spell is broken. She can't hide from who she is forever, and the longer she stays, the harder it becomes to maintain this facade of normalcy. "You should probably head back now," Marcus says, reading her internal struggle. "The last safe train's in 20 minutes. He starts gathering his things, preparing to guide her to the station. Sarah feels the moment slipping away, and with it, the chance to make a real difference. But how can she help without destroying the delicate ecosystem she's witnessed tonight? How can she use her resources without undermining the dignity and independence that Marcus and his community have fought so hard to maintain? As they walk toward the station, Sarah's mind works furiously. There must be a way to bridge these worlds, to use her influence without imposing her values. She thinks about Marcus's students, about Carmen's tamales, about Maria's garden, about a brilliant former teacher reduced to sleeping on streets that he now protects. The answer starts to form in her mind. Not a charity project, but something more sustainable. A way to provide opportunities without creating dependency. But first, she needs to find the courage to reveal her true identity, knowing it might shatter this genuine connection they've built. They reach the station just as the train approaches. Sarah turns to Marcus, words of truth on the tip of her tongue. But looking at his face, seeing the quiet dignity there, she holds back. Not here, not now. This moment of genuine humanity deserves to exist untainted by the complications of wealth and status. "Thank you," she says instead, "for everything." The words feel inadequate for what this night has shown her. Marcus nods, understanding more than she realizes. "Be safe out there," he says. And remember what you saw tonight. Really. Remember? As the train doors close between them, Sarah makes a silent promise. She will remember, and she will find a way to help that honors the strength and dignity she's witnessed. But first, she has some serious thinking to do about what real impact looks like. Dawn breaks over Chicago as Sarah sits in her penthouse suite, still wearing the clothes from last night. Her phone lies on the desk. Dozens of missed calls now returned. Her temporary disappearance explained away as a migraine and poor cell. Reception. The corporate world has been appeased, but her mind remains on the streets below. Her laptop glows with search results. Marcus Johnson, former English teacher at Carter High School. Academic awards, glowing testimonials from students, innovative teaching methods that boosted literacy rates in one of Chicago's toughest neighborhoods. Articles from local papers paint a picture, a dedicated educator who made Shakespeare accessible to inner-city kids, who stayed late to tutor struggling students, who believed in second chances. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. A car accident, his mother's lengthy hospital stay, insurance complications, mounting medical bills. Sarah reads between the lines of public records. A second mortgage, loans taken against his pension, finally bankruptcy. The system that should have protected him instead ground him down until the streets became his only option. Computer, start recording. Sarah speaks to her laptop. New project file. Education Access Initiative. She begins pacing, her tech entrepreneur's mind spinning with possibilities. Priority 1. Mobile learning platforms for homeless youth. Requirements: offline functionality, durability, solar charging capabilities, integration with existing GED programs. She stops, remembering Marcus's words about human connection. No, technology alone isn't the answer. She needs something more holistic, more human. A knock at her door interrupts her thoughts. Ms. Chen, the board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Her assistant's voice carries barely concealed panic. After all, it's not like the CEO to go off-grid for an entire night. I'll be there, Sarah calls back, already moving to change into her corporate armor. But as she buttons her blazer, her eyes catch the simple sweater and jeans from last night, now draped over a chair. The contrast feels symbolic. Two worlds, two versions of herself, separated by circumstance and choice. In the bathroom mirror, she barely recognizes herself. The polished tech executive stares back, but her eyes have changed. They've seen too much to unsee, understood too much to forget. She thinks of Marcus's notebook, filled with stories of people society has forgotten. What would he write about her, she wonders, if he knew who she really was? The board meeting passes in a blur of quarterly reports and profit projections. Sarah participates on autopilot, her mind sketching out a different kind of proposal. Between discussions of market share and user acquisition, she's designing something new, a bridge between worlds. And finally, the CFO concludes, we have a surplus in the corporate social responsibility budget that needs to be allocated before the quarter ends. Our PR team suggests education. Sarah interrupts, surprising everyone. I want a comprehensive new proposal for educational technology initiatives focusing on homeless and at-risk youth. Full spectrum, hardware, software, and human infrastructure. The board members exchange glances. This isn't the usual Sarah Chen, who typically focuses on mainstream market opportunities. But something in her voice, a new intensity, stops any immediate objections. Back in her office, Sarah pulls up her company's charitable giving records. The numbers are impressive on paper. Millions donated to various causes, but how much has actually created lasting change? How many lives have really been transformed? She opens a new document and begins to type, Project Second Chance, a comprehensive approach to educational equity. Her fingers fly over the keyboard as she outlines a program that would combine technology access with human mentorship, creating opportunities for both students and teachers who've fallen through society's cracks. But as she works, a nagging doubt grows. How will Marcus react when he learns who she really is? Will he see her help as just another rich person's attempt at salvation? Will it destroy the genuine connection they've formed? Her office window offers a view of the street where she first met him. Somewhere down there he's probably helping another lost soul, sharing his knowledge, maintaining his dignity despite everything life has thrown at him. She has the power to change his circumstances, but does she have the right? Sarah saves the document and stands, making a decision. Before she implements any plans, she owes him the truth. He deserves to know who she really is, even if it means risking the trust they've built. First, though, she needs to figure out exactly how to tell him. The following evening finds Sarah walking the streets again, this time dressed in a careful compromise between her worlds. Simple clothes, but quality ones. No disguise tonight. She owes Marcus the truth, even if it costs her his respect. She finds him in the park where the teenagers study, his worn notebook open as he helps a young girl with algebra. Sarah hangs back, watching the patient way he explains complex concepts, making them accessible through real-world examples. The girl's face lights up with understanding, and Sarah sees the teacher Marcus must have been. When the lesson ends, the girl hugs Marcus impulsively before running off to join her friends. Only then does Sarah step forward. Marcus spots her, surprise flickering across his face before being replaced by something more guarded. "You came back," he says simply, closing his notebook. "I needed to talk to you." Sarah glances at the chess tables, now empty. "Do you have a minute?" They sit, the chess pieces standing like silent witnesses between them. Sarah notices he's wearing the same clothes as yesterday, his backpack placed carefully beside the bench. The sight strengthens her resolve. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," she begins, but Marcus cuts her off with a gentle shake of his head. "You're Sarah Chen," he says quietly, "CEO of TechFuture. I recognized you last night after you left. Your face was on the cover of Business Week at the library last month." Sarah sits back, stunned. "You knew all along." "Not at first, but the way you talked about technology, about impact, it started to make sense." He manages a small smile. "Plus, those weren't just any designer sneakers. They were limited edition TechFuture collaboration ones. Why didn't you say anything?" Marcus looks out over the park, considering his answer. "You needed to be anonymous that night. I understood that. Sometimes we need to step outside our normal roles to see things clearly." Sarah feels tears threatening and blinks them back. "I want to help," she says, opening her bag and pulling out a tablet. "I've been working on something, a program that would provide educational technology and support for homeless youth, but also opportunities for teachers, people like you, to get back into education, even without traditional classroom settings." She hands him the tablet, watching as he scrolls through her proposal. His face gives nothing away, but his hands tighten slightly on the device. "It's not charity," she adds quickly. "It's an investment in human potential. The kids you teach, they deserve access to tools that could help them succeed. And you're too good a teacher to be lost to the streets." Marcus is quiet for a long moment, still staring at the screen. "This is well thought out," he finally says, his voice professional, analytical. "The integration of technology with personal mentorship, the focus on dignity and independence. You understand more than most would." Hope rises in Sarah's chest, but his next words stop it cold. "But I can't accept this." He hands the tablet back carefully. "Not for myself anyway." "Why not?" Sarah struggles to keep frustration from her voice. "You help these kids with nothing but a notebook and determination. Think what you could do with proper resources." "It's not that simple." Marcus picks up his backpack, clutching it like a shield. "The moment I accept help from someone like you, everything changes. The dynamics with the kids, my place in this community. I'd become a charity case, not a teacher. That's not true. It is. His voice is gentle but firm. But the program itself, he gestures at the tablet. For the kids, something like this could make a real difference. If you're serious about implementing it, I'd be willing to consult, help you understand what they really need, but not as a recipient, as an advisor. Sarah watches him. This proud man who would rather sleep on streets than compromise his principles. She thinks about all she's learned about dignity and worth in the past 24 hours. Okay, she says finally. We'll do it your way, but at least let me buy you coffee while we discuss it. Professional courtesy, remember? The ghost of a smile touches Marcus's lips. Professional courtesy, he agrees. But as they stand to leave, Sarah notices him glance back at the tablet, and she realizes that the battle isn't over. She just needs to find a way to help that honors who he is, not who she thinks he should be. Marcus walks for hours after leaving Sarah, his feet carrying him through familiar streets that suddenly feel different. Every storefront window shows his reflection, forcing him to confront the choice he's just made. The tablet's sleek interface had felt natural in his hands, awakening muscle memories from his teaching days, smartboards, online gradebooks, educational software that could make learning come alive. He finds himself at the library just before closing time. Miss Reynolds, the night librarian, lets him in with a sympathetic smile. Rough day, Professor. She's called him that since she first caught him helping kids with homework between the stacks. Just thinking too much, he replies, making his way to the computers. The screen glows to life, and his fingers hover over the keyboard before typing Sarah Chen Tech Future Education Initiatives. The results paint a picture he hadn't allowed himself to see earlier. Her company's educational software is revolutionizing learning in underfunded schools, free coding camps in low-income neighborhoods, scholarship programs that have sent hundreds of disadvantaged kids to college. This isn't some rich person's vanity project. She's been doing this work for years, quietly and effectively. He pulls out his notebook, turning to the pages where he tracks his students' progress. Jamal, brilliant at math, but struggling to access online courses. Maria, writing poetry that deserves to be read beyond these streets. Tony, teaching himself coding through snatched moments at public computers. Pride is all well and good, he thinks, but is it worth denying them opportunities? His mother's voice echoes in his memory. Knowledge and kindness, but don't forget wisdom. Was he being wise, turning down a chance to help not just himself, but all the kids who've become his unofficial students? The library announces closing. Time. Outside, he finds his feet taking him to Carter High School, his old workplace. The building is dark except for the security lights, but he can still see the classroom that was once his sanctuary. Third floor, second window from the left. How many late afternoons had he spent there, helping students discover their voices through literature? A security guard approaches, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Everything okay, sir? Marcus starts to move away, then recognizes the face. Roderick, Mr. J? The guard lowers his flashlight. Man, we've been wondering about you. Some of your old students, they come back asking. The conversation that follows hits him harder than any physical blow. His former students, now in college or working, still talking about his class, the impact he'd had, the lives he'd touched. Roderick tells him about Andrea, a student he'd helped prepare for the SATs, now studying education herself because Mr. Johnson showed me what a teacher should be. By the time he reaches his sleeping spot near the library, the first hints of dawn are touching the sky. His notebook feels heavy in his hands as he sits, leaning against the concrete planter. He opens it to a fresh page and begins to write, trying to sort through his thoughts. Is it pride or principle keeping him from accepting help? Where's the line between maintaining dignity and being stubborn? He thinks about Sarah's offer, not just the technology, but the chance to teach again, to make a real difference. She'd seen him as a colleague, not a charity case. Offered him a seat at the table as an advisor, someone whose experience and insight had value. His fingers traced the worn edges of his teaching credential, still kept carefully in a plastic sleeve. 3 years on the streets haven't dulled his passion for education, haven't diminished his ability to connect with students and make learning come alive. If anything, this life has taught him lessons he could never have learned in a traditional classroom. The morning sun catches the metal of his old teacher's watch, a graduation gift from his first class. It hasn't worked in years, but he's kept it as a reminder of who he is at his core. A teacher, not was, is. Even without a classroom, even without resources, he's never stopped teaching. Maybe that's the key. This isn't about him, or his pride, or even Sarah's wealth. It's about the kids, the ones sleeping in shelters, studying by streetlight, fighting to learn despite everything life has thrown at them. If he's truly committed to being a teacher, doesn't he owe it to them to at least consider any opportunity to help them succeed? Dawn fully breaks over Chicago as Marcus makes his decision. He carefully tears the page from his notebook, folds it, and places it in his pocket. Then he begins walking toward the coffee shop where he's supposed to meet Sarah to discuss the program. He has some ideas he wants to share with her, not as a recipient of charity, but as an educator who knows exactly what these kids need to succeed. The Chicago Tribune article appears first. Homeless Teachers Street Academy draws tech CEO's attention. The story spreads like wildfire, picked up by local news stations, then national outlets. Someone had spotted Sarah Chen, the usually private tech billionaire, sitting in a park with a homeless man, deep in conversation over a tablet computer. Marcus discovers the article when he notices people staring at him in the library. Miss Reynolds silently hands him the newspaper, concern in her eyes. His students' faces peer out from the page, photos taken during their evening study sessions, their determined expressions captured in respectful detail. The journalist had done her homework, tracking down his former students, colleagues, even digging up his teaching awards. But it's the comments section that stops his heart. Hundreds of voices, many from former students. Mr. Johnson taught me Shakespeare when I thought it was impossible. Now I'm teaching it myself. He helped me get into college when everyone else had given up. Even on the streets, he never stopped being a teacher. Sarah's phone hasn't stopped ringing since the story broke. Her PR team wants to capitalize on the publicity, suggesting press conferences and photo ops. She shuts them down immediately, remembering Marcus's words about dignity. Instead, she posts a single, carefully worded statement on social media. Sometimes we look so hard for innovative solutions that we miss the innovation happening on our streets. Chicago has shown me that education doesn't need walls. It needs dedicated teachers who never stop believing in human potential. I'm honored to learn from those who teach not for glory or profit, but because they can't imagine doing anything else. The post goes viral, but it's what she doesn't say that matters most to Marcus. No mention of his homelessness, no pitying narrative about rescue or redemption. She's presented him as he truly is, an educator whose classroom happens to be the streets. The story takes an unexpected turn when Carter High School's current principal speaks to the media. She reveals that several of Marcus's innovative teaching methods are still used at the school, passed down by colleagues who refuse to let his approaches die. His old classroom, she mentions, has remained Room J in his honor, even after 3 years. Local businesses begin reaching out. The owner of the tamale shop is interviewed, speaking about how Marcus helped her daughter with college applications while asking nothing in return. The late-night diner owner talks about his quiet ways of keeping the neighborhood safe. The homeless teens he tutors share stories of transformation, of finding hope through education. But it's the tech community's response that truly changes the game. Other companies begin contacting Sarah, wanting to join her initiative. A rival CEO publicly admits that he'd been one of Marcus's students 20 years ago, in a different school district. He taught me to think critically, to question everything, the CEO says in a viral video. Without him, I wouldn't be where I am today. Marcus weathers the attention with characteristic dignity, continuing his evening lessons despite the occasional news van or curious onlooker. When a reporter asks him how it feels to be called a hero, he replies simply, "I'm not a hero, I'm a teacher. Everything else is just circumstance." Sarah watches all this unfold from her office, understanding that their story has tapped into something deeper than charity or human interest. It's made people question their assumptions about success, about teaching, about the arbitrary lines society draws between those who have and those who help. One morning, she finds a handwritten note slipped under her office door. In Marcus's careful script, maybe we're both right. You about the need for resources, me about maintaining dignity. The kids deserve everything we can give them. Let's find a way to do this that keeps their dignity and mine intact. Ready to get to work? Sarah reads the note 3 times, then reaches for her phone. It's time to turn this media storm into real change, not just for Marcus and his students, but for every teacher and student who's been forced to the margins by circumstance. The response begins slowly, like ripples in a pond, then builds into a wave. Marcus's former students start showing up at the park during study sessions, offering to help tutor. They come from all walks of life. College students, young professionals, even a few teachers who'd been inspired by his methods. Among them is Michael Torres, now a software engineer at a local tech startup. "Mr. Johnson taught me to code using nothing but a whiteboard and determination," he tells the group of homeless teens gathered around him. "Said I had a mind for logic. Nobody had ever told me that before." Now he's teaching them Python using laptops provided through Sarah's initial program. The library extends its hours to accommodate the growing study groups. Miss Reynolds coordinates with other branches to create a network of safe learning spaces. Education doesn't close at 5 p.m., she argues at a library board meeting, and neither should we. The motion passes unanimously. Carmen's tamale shop becomes an unofficial headquarters for the movement. She sets up a small study corner, complete with free Wi-Fi and a charging station. "My daughter's in college now because of El Profesor," she tells customers. "This is how we pay it forward." The smell of fresh tamales mingles with the sound of students practicing English, math, coding. Sarah watches all this unfold with growing understanding. Her original plan for a structured, corporate-style program seems almost rigid compared to the organic community response. Instead of imposing a system, she begins providing resources where they're needed most. Laptops that can be checked out like library books, mobile hotspots for internet access, educational software licenses, but it's the former students who truly transform the initiative. They understand both worlds, the streets and the professional sphere. They become bridges, mentors who can speak from experience about climbing out of difficult circumstances through education. "Remember when you made us memorize those Shakespeare sonnets?" A former student, now a paralegal, asks Marcus during a study session. "I thought it was pointless. Then I realized it wasn't about the sonnets. It was about proving to ourselves we could master anything." The street community embraces the changes in their own way. Carl and Maria, the elderly homeless couple, become unofficial grandparents to the studying teens, providing encouragement and keeping an eye out for trouble. Street musicians adjust their playing spots to avoid disturbing study sessions. Even the local police begin stopping by, not to chase anyone away, but to ask about the program. Marcus finds himself at the center of it all, yet somehow not overwhelmed. He works with Sarah to ensure the program maintains its grassroots character while accessing the resources it needs. His notebook, once filled with solitary observations, now contains meeting notes, curriculum ideas, and an ever-growing list of students seeking help. This is what real change looks like. he tells Sarah during one of their regular planning sessions. Not top-down, but from within. Every person who succeeds becomes a hand reaching back to help others up. Sarah, watching a former gang member patiently explain algebra to a teenage runaway, understands exactly what he means. She's learned to step back, to let the community's wisdom guide her company's resources. Her board members don't always understand this approach, but the results speak for themselves. A local news crew arrives to film a segment about the program. They expect to find a traditional classroom setup. Instead, they discover learning happening. Everywhere, in park corners, diner booths, library aisles, they find dignity instead of desperation, hope instead of handouts. This isn't a story about charity, the reporter concludes her piece. It's a story about community, about remembering that sometimes the best teachers aren't found in classrooms, and the most valuable lessons don't come from textbooks. Marcus watches the segment on the library's TV, surrounded by his growing extended family of students past and present. When someone calls him a hero again, he just smiles and opens his notebook. Heroes work alone, he says. Teachers build communities. Now, who needs help with their GED prep? The autumn chill has given way to winter's bite when Marcus finally allows himself to face a truth he's been avoiding. Standing in front of Carter High School's main entrance after hours, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass, he realizes his pride has become a wall rather than a shield. Inside, the school board is meeting to discuss Sarah's proposal for a new type of educational program, one that would bring teachers to students who can't access traditional classrooms. Marcus's name heads the list of potential instructors, but he hasn't given his answer yet. "You're late," Sarah's voice comes from behind him. She's dressed down tonight, having learned that power suits create barriers in this neighborhood. "The meeting started 10 minutes ago. Not sure I'm going in." His breath fogs in the cold air. "Keep thinking about the last time I walked out these doors." Sarah moves to stand beside him, both their reflections now haunting the glass. "Tell me. I just filed for bankruptcy. Couldn't face the kids knowing I'd failed them, that I couldn't be the teacher they deserved anymore." He pulls out his notebook, its pages now doubled with inserted documents and planning notes. Easier to disappear than to admit defeat. And now, Marcus opens the notebook to a recent page filled with names, his current students, their progress, their dreams. "Now I understand that disappearing was the real failure. These kids don't need a perfect teacher. They need someone who understands falling down doesn't mean staying down." Inside the building, lights flicker on in the third-floor classroom, his old room, the cleaning staff making their rounds. The sight stirs memories, late afternoons helping students, early mornings preparing lessons, the moment when understanding would dawn in a young person's eyes. "You know what I've learned from you?" Sarah asks, surprising him. "That I've been thinking about impact all wrong. I thought it was about numbers, users, downloads, market penetration. But real impact? It's about moments, connections. One person saying to another, 'I believe in you,' and meaning it." Marcus thinks about the growing community their program has created. Former students teaching current ones, business owners offering spaces for study groups, even the library network expanding its hours. All because people chose connection over convenience, involvement over indifference. "Your company's bored," he says carefully. "They're not all happy about this approach, are they?" Sarah laughs softly. "They think I've lost my mind. Want to know why I'm focusing on one small community program instead of scaling up nationally." She turns to face him. "They don't understand that some things need to grow from the ground up, not the top down." A group of Marcus's current students appears at the corner, right on schedule for their evening study session. They wave, then settle onto the school's front steps, pulling out books and tablets. They've chosen this spot deliberately, he knows, showing him that they belong here just as much as any daytime student. 3 years, he says quietly. 3 years I've been telling myself I was protecting my dignity by refusing help. But maybe he watches one teen help another with a math problem the same way he taught them. Maybe dignity isn't about refusing help. Maybe it's about what you do with the help you receive. Sarah touches his arm gently. The board's waiting. But whatever you decide, the program continues. These kids will have support, with or without you as an official teacher. Marcus looks at his reflection one more time. The same person who walked out these doors 3 years ago, but different too. Stronger, perhaps. Wiser, definitely. His mother's words come back to him. Knowledge and kindness, but don't forget wisdom. Well, he says, straightening his shoulders. Can't very well teach them about overcoming fear if I won't face my own. He tucks his notebook away and reaches for the door. Coming? Sarah smiles, hearing in his question the echo of that first night when she'd chosen to trust a stranger on dark streets. Lead the way, Professor. Together, they walk into the school, leaving their reflections behind. Through the glass, they can see Marcus's students watching, their faces bright with something that looks like pride. One of them gives a thumbs up, and Marcus returns it, understanding finally that coming back isn't admitting defeat, it's claiming victory. The school board meeting stretches late into the night. Marcus sits quietly as Sarah presents their vision. Not just a program, but a revolution in how education reaches those who need it most. The board members listen, some skeptical, others intrigued as she outlines the success they've already achieved with informal classes. But why this school? One board member asks. Why not start fresh somewhere else? Before Sarah can answer, Marcus stands. The room falls silent, and he feels the weight of every eye upon him. 3 years of street survival have taught him to read rooms, to sense undercurrents. These people aren't just evaluating a program, they're judging whether to believe in second chances. Because these halls still know my footsteps, he says, his teacher's voice filling the space. Because every day I see students studying on those front steps, proving they want to learn, even when the system's given up on them. Because coming back here isn't just about me. It's about showing every kid who's ever felt lost that finding your way home is possible. He opens his notebook, drawing strength from its worn pages. In the past 3 months, we've helped 12 students earn their GEDs. 3 have started college applications. 1 is interviewing for a coding internship. He looks around the room. And we did this without classrooms, without funding, without anything except determination and support from a community that refuses to give up on its children. Sarah watches him, seeing not the homeless man she met that night, but an educator in his element. His careful records detail every student's progress, every small victory, every setback overcome. The board members lean forward, drawn in by the quiet authority in his voice. We're not asking for charity, Marcus continues. We're offering a partnership. Your empty classrooms after hours, our students hungry to learn. Your resources, our real-world experience. Together we can build something that doesn't just help my current students, but creates a model for reaching every child who's slipped and through the cracks. The principal, who has been silent until now, speaks up. Room J has been waiting for you, Marcus. She smiles. Maybe it's time to come home. A board member raises his hand. What about credentials? Requirements? It's been 3 years. His teaching license is still valid, Sarah interjects smoothly. I checked, and every student he's helped in the past 3 months has shown measurable improvement. The data supports what we can all see. He never stopped being a teacher. The vote, when it comes, is unanimous. The program is approved, with Marcus as its first instructor. But it's the additional motion proposed by a quiet board member in the back that changes everything. Expanding the program to include other displaced teachers, creating a network of educators who understand firsthand the challenges their students face. Outside, Marcus's students are still waiting on the steps despite the late hour. They've been joined by others, former students, community members, even some of the parents. The crowd holds its breath as Marcus and Sarah emerge. Marcus looks at their faces, hopeful anxious, determined, and feels the full circle of his journey. From these steps he'd walked away in shame 3 years ago. To these steps he'd returned night after night, teaching anyone willing to learn. And now, on these steps, he's about to begin a new chapter. He nods once, and the eruption of cheers breaks the night's silence. Later, after the crowd disperses, Sarah finds Marcus in his old classroom. He's standing at the window, looking out over the city that both broke and rebuilt him. Having second thoughts? She asks. No. He runs a hand along the old desk. His desk, soon again. Just remembering something my mother used to say about pride. That it's good to have, but better to put aside when something more important is at stake. Sarah moves to stand beside him, both of them reflective. You know this is just the beginning. Once word gets out about the program's approval, others will come, he finishes. Other teachers who've fallen on hard times. Other students who need a different path. He smiles slightly. Good thing I've had practice thinking on my feet. Through the window, they can see the city stretching out before them, thousands of lights twinkling like possibilities. Somewhere out there, other teachers are sleeping rough, other students are studying by streetlight, but now there's a path forward, a way to bridge the gap between what is and what could be. Ready? Sarah asks, heading for the door. Marcus takes one last look around the classroom, then nods, picking up his notebook. Time to start writing the next chapter. Spring brings change to Chicago, and not just in the weather. Room J has transformed from a standard classroom into something entirely new. The traditional rows of desks have been replaced by flexible seating arrangements that can be easily reconfigured for different group sizes. Smart boards and tablets share space with well-worn books and Marcus's ever-present notebook. The walls feature a mix of classical literature quotes and coding syntax guides, a bridge between traditional education and modern skills. Marcus stands at the front of the room, no longer in his street clothes, but wearing a simple button-down shirt and slacks. Yet he's kept his worn backpack, now serving as a reminder rather than a necessity. Education, he tells his first official class, isn't about where you are, it's about where you're going. His students are a diverse group, teenagers who've aged out of traditional schools, young adults seeking GEDs, even a few seniors wanting to finish what life interrupted decades ago. They come from shelters, from streets, from minimum wage jobs that barely keep them housed. Each carries a story, and Marcus makes sure they know those stories have value. Sarah's influence is evident in the technology seamlessly integrated into the space. Each student has access to a secure locker containing a laptop and mobile hotspot, tools they can take home for continued learning. The programming isn't just about education, it's about dignity. Students earn their equipment through participation and helping others, creating a cycle of responsibility and community support. Remember, Marcus tells them, everyone in this room is both a student and a teacher. Your experiences matter, your perspectives matter, your future matters. The program expands faster than anyone anticipated. Other displaced teachers emerge from the shadows of the city, drawn by the hope of returning to their calling. Sarah's team works overtime to vet and integrate them, while Marcus helps them readjust, understanding their struggles firsthand. James Chen, a former math teacher, who lost everything to medical debt, now leads advanced placement calculus classes in the evening. Maria Gonzalez, once a celebrated science teacher before domestic violence forced her into hiding, creates an innovative lab program using simple household materials. Each brings their own experience of survival and resilience, enriching the curriculum in ways no traditional program could match. The community continues to evolve around the program. Carmen's Tamale Shop becomes an official study center, with Sarah's company providing equipment and internet access. The library network develops a specialized program for homeless and at-risk students, with dedicated computer hours and quiet. Study spaces. Local businesses offer internships and job training, understanding that education is just the first step towards stability. Sarah finds herself transformed as well. Board meetings now include regular visits to the program, where executives in expensive suits sit in on classes, often learning as much as they observe. She's developed a new metric for success, not just test scores and completion rates, but the number of students who return to help others. It's not scalable, one board member complains during a quarterly review. No, Sarah agrees, it's sustainable, and that's more important. She shows them the data. 90% retention rate, 85% improvement in core subjects, 70% of graduates either pursuing higher education or securing stable employment. We're not just teaching subjects, we're building a community that can sustain itself. The program faces its challenges. Some students disappear for weeks, pulled away by the harsh realities of survival. Others struggle with the structure after years of chaos. Marcus and his team learn to be flexible, to understand that progress isn't always linear. One evening, Marcus finds a young man sleeping in the school doorway, another teacher fallen on hard times. Instead of calling security, he sits down beside him. They talk until dawn, and by morning the program has another instructor, one who understands exactly what their students are facing. The media attention continues, but it's different now. Instead of focusing on the novelty of a homeless teacher and a tech billionaire, they report on the results. Other cities begin sending representatives to observe, hoping to replicate the program's success. Marcus and Sarah field calls from education departments across the country, sharing their model while emphasizing the importance of organic, community-driven growth. A year into the program, they host a graduation ceremony. It's not traditional. It's held at night to accommodate working students, and the diplomas are handed out alongside practical tools for continued success. Laptops, professional clothes, job recommendations. The graduates range in age from 18 to 72, each one representing a story of perseverance. Marcus stands at the podium, his notebook open to a page filled with names. Students who started this journey with him on park benches and library steps. When I left teaching 3 years ago, he tells the audience, I thought I had failed. What I didn't understand was that sometimes we need to lose our way to find a better path. Each of you has taught me that education isn't confined to classrooms, that learning happens wherever there's someone willing to teach and someone eager to learn. In the audience, Sarah watches the faces of the graduates. She sees pride, yes, but also determination. These aren't people looking for handouts. They're individuals who fought for their education, who understand its true value. Her company's investment has paid off in ways no financial report could capture. The ceremony ends with an unexpected announcement. The school board, impressed by the program's success, has approved its expansion. More classrooms will be opened for evening classes, more teachers hired from non-traditional backgrounds. But it's the next part that brings tears to eyes. The creation of a scholarship fund, named in honor of Marcus's mother, for students who've overcome homelessness to pursue education. As the graduates celebrate, Marcus finds a quiet moment to write in his notebook. He's kept every story, every small victory, every setback overcome. These pages tell the real story of the program. Not in statistics or funding reports, but in human moments of transformation. Sarah joins him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Professional courtesy, she offers, echoing their first real conversation. Marcus accepts the cup with a smile. Professional courtesy. He agrees. They stand in comfortable silence, watching their unlikely partnership bear fruit in the joy of the graduates, in the pride of their families, in the hope visible on every face. Through the windows of Room J, the city lights twinkle like stars, each one perhaps marking another story waiting to be transformed. Marcus opens his notebook to a fresh page, ready to begin the next chapter of their ongoing revolution in education, one student, one teacher, one story at a time. 1 year to the day since their chance encounter on Michigan Avenue, Sarah finds herself walking the same street. The neon lights still cast long shadows, but tonight they tell a different story. She spots Marcus ahead, no longer sleeping rough, but still spending his evenings in these familiar streets. He's not alone. A small group follows him, new teachers being trained in the program's unique approach to street outreach. They're learning what Marcus knows so well, that education doesn't wait for perfect conditions, that sometimes the best classrooms have no walls. "Ready for your shift?" he asks as she approaches. These nights are part of their new routine. Once a month, every executive in Sarah's company who works with the education program joins the street outreach teams. It's not for show, it's about maintaining connection with the reality their work addresses. "Always," she replies, falling into. Step beside him. Her designer clothes have been replaced by practical wear, but she still carries the same determination that drove her to escape her corporate bubble that fateful night. They pass Carmen's tamale shop, now expanded into a full community center, with a computer lab upstairs. Through the window, they can see students of all ages working on laptops, sharing meals, building the future one keystroke at a time. Carmen's daughter, now home from college, teaches coding classes 3 nights a week. The library stays open late now, Miss Reynolds having successfully argued for extended hours at all branches. The chess tables in the park have multiplied, each one a potential classroom. Even the late-night diner has become an official study spot, its owner proud to provide a safe space for learning. Marcus still carries his notebook, though it's no longer his only possession. Its pages tell the story of their program's evolution, from desperate necessity to revolutionary model. Other cities have begun adopting their approach, understanding that education can bridge any gap, heal any divide, if delivered with respect and understanding. Sarah's company has changed too. The board that once questioned her focus now uses their program as a case study in sustainable community investment. But more importantly, she's learned to measure success not in stock prices or market share, but in lives transformed. "You know," Marcus says as they round the corner where they first met, "my mother would have loved this. She always said knowledge and kindness could change the world. She just never specified it had to happen in a traditional classroom." Sarah smiles, remembering how far they've come from that rainy night of fear and uncertainty. She was right. And so were you. About dignity, about community, about real change happening from within. They pause at the corner, watching the city move around them. Somewhere in the distance, a saxophone plays, Jerry still making his nightly music. Students hurry past with laptops and dreams. Teachers, once homeless themselves, guide others toward hope. "Ready to find today's story?" Marcus asks, opening his notebook to a fresh page. Sarah nods, understanding now that every night brings new opportunities to change a life, to bridge a divide, to prove that sometimes the best innovations aren't technological, they're human. "Lead the way, Professor," she says. "Lead the way."